Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. There's a few housekeeping chores or announcements. First of all, turn these off. Second, any donations would be appreciated, but if they all go to outreach, thermal belt outreach. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Carolina Foothills, which is a mouthful. Tonight's special guest is a famous, or should I say infamous, essayist and lecturer, and Tryon is fortunate to be a stop on his tour. Please help me welcome the delinquent yet delightful homeboy from Hannibal, Missouri, Mr. Mark Twain.
I was told I couldn't smoke. I can hardly talk without smoking. So I'm going to hold this cigar and pretend to smoke it while I talk. I don't see any harm in that. I never started smoking till I was 9 years old. And even then I wasn't constant about it. I was always ready to reform if I could find a profit in it. About the only profit I could find in it was the heavenly pleasure of giving up a reform and starting to smoke again. It reminds me of a lady who came to see me one time for medical advice. She'd gone down, down, down. She finally reached a point where medicine wasn't helpful to her. I told her, I said, I can have you on your feet in a week. Oh, she brightened up when she heard that. She got all excited. She said, well, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I said, all right. You got to stop smoking and drinking and swearing for 4 days and you'll be all right. And I know it would have been so. But then she said, I can't stop smoking and drinking and swearing. I don't do those things. Well, there it was. She neglected her habits. She didn't have any. Nothing in stock. Nothing to fall back on. Well, she was like a sinking vessel without any freight to throw overboard. Lighten the load. One or two bad habits would have saved her, but, well, she was just a moral faulter. And when she could have required her parents dissuaded her. Ignorant people. Though reared in the best of society. Well, it was too late to start now. It's a pity, but there was just nothing I could do for her. These things need to be attended to when a person is young. Otherwise, when old age or disease sets in, why there's just nothing to fix or to fight them with.
We were here for Christine's exhibit.
Man is, without a doubt, the most interesting jackass there is. I wish I knew who invented him. Well, he can hardly take a plain fact and make a wrong meaning out of it. He can't help it. That's the way the confusion he calls his mind is constructed. Why, just consider the things he concedes and the curious conclusions he draws from. For instance, he concedes that God made man. And God made the whole entire universe for man. Let me read to you from the latest edition of the Literary Journal. Last week's publication. Alfred Russel Wallace's revival of the theory that the Earth is the center of the stellar universe and the only habitable globe has aroused great interest in the world. And this from the Chicago Interior. last week's edition. We for ourselves do thoroughly believe that man as he exists on this tiny planet is in all essence and possibilities the most sublime existence in all the range of non-divine beings. God's chief love and delight. You know, I seem to be the only scientist and theologian still remaining to be heard from on this important matter. Well, I think it's time for me to speak. I stand almost with the others. They believe the world was made for man. I believe that, well, I believe likely it was made for man. They believe there's proof, astronomical mainly, that it was made for man, but I don't believe there's proof. I believe there's evidence, but not proof. Why, it's too early to arrange a verdict. All the returns are not in yet. When they're all in, I think they'll show the world was made for man, but we must not get in a hurry. We must wait patiently till they're all in. Now, as far as we've got, astrology is on our side. Mr. Wallace has clearly shown this. He's clearly shown two things. That the world was made for man, and that the universe was made for the world, a stage, you know. Now the astrology part is settled and can't be disputed. But as Lord Kelvin is the highest authority in science now living, well, I think we ought to yield to him and accept his views. He does not concede that the world is more than 100 million years old. That old, but not older. Now Herbert Spencer believes our species was introduced 32,000 years ago. Very well. According to these numbers, it took 99,968,000 years to prepare the world for man. Well, there's the history of it. Man has been here 32,000 years. That it took nearly 100 million years to prepare the world for him is proof that that's what it was done for. I reckon, I don't know. You know, if the Eiffel Tower was representing the world's age, and the skin paint on the pinnacle ball of its summit was representing man sharing that age, why anybody would know that skin was what the tower was built for. Now the Bible and its servants believe the world's only 6,000 years old. It's only been in the last 100 years that studious minds have shown that it's near 1 million. That innocent Bible tells all about creation. Creation of what? Well, creation of the universe in 6 days. And it tells how on the 6th day God made a man and a woman and placed them in a pleasant garden along with all the other creatures. And there they lived in harmony and contentment and blooming youth for some time. And then trouble came. God told the pair not to eat the fruit of a certain tree in the garden. And he added a most strange remark. He told them if they ate it, they would surely die. Well, strange for inasmuch as they'd never seen a sample of death, they couldn't possibly know what he was talking about. Why, he or any other God wouldn't have made those ignorant children understand what was meant without furnishing a sample. Why, the word would mean no more to them than it would an infant of days. Well, presently, the serpent sought them out in private. He came walking them upright, which is the way of serpents in those days. And the serpent said the forbidden fruit would store their vacant minds with knowledge. So they ate it, which is quite natural. The man is so made that he eagerly wants to know. Whereas the priest, like God, whose representative he is, has made it his business from the beginning to keep him from knowing anything useful. Well, Adam and Eve ate the fruit, and once a great light streamed into their dim heads, they had acquired knowledge. What knowledge? Useful knowledge? No. Merely the knowledge that there was such a thing as good and such a thing as evil, and how to do evil. They couldn't do it before. Therefore, all their acts up to that time were without stain, without blame, or without offense. But now they could do evil and suffer for it. They had acquired what the church calls that most valuable possession in the moral sense. That sense which differentiates man from the beast and sets him up above the beast, instead of down below where his proper place should be, since he's always foul-minded and guilty, and the beast clean-minded and innocent. Why, it's like valuing a watch that must go wrong above a watch that can. Well, Adam and Eve knew what evil was and how to do it. They knew how to do various kinds of wrong things. And among them was one in particular, one that the deity had his mind on in particular. And that was the supreme mystery and art of sexual intercourse. Oh, to them it was a magnificent discovery. They stopped idling around and turned their whole attention to it. Poor exalted young things. Well, in the midst of one of these celebrations, they heard God walking in the bushes. And they were smitten with fright. Why? Well, because they were naked. They didn't know it before and they didn't care. But they had acquired modesty in the soil of mind. Now, every Christian mother's first duty is to soil her child's mind. And she does not neglect it. Her lad grows up, becomes a missionary, and goes to the innocent savage and the civilized Japanese and soils their minds. The convention of modesty has no standards. It's opposed by both nature and reason, and therefore it is an artificiality, subject to anybody's whim. Now, on that note, let me resurrect the story of the York Ministry episode of 75 years ago and enlarge on it for present purposes. The York Minister, that was his nickname, was a native of Tierra del Fuego. He was a likable young fella, bright, animated, rather handsome, and of a particularly shapely figure, if you know what I mean. Let him be where he was, his figure was always on exhibition because he wore not a stitch of clothing, except for a square of untanned skin he threw over his shoulders. And he wasn't modest about it one bit. And it wasn't conspicuous because it was the costume of his entire nation. Well, the captain of a British warship fitted York Minster out some Christian clothing, taught him the rudiments of English speech, and took him home over the seas. Oh, he was a sensation. Crowds welcomed him, tables were full of him. All ranks offered him their hospitalities. And naturally, he was pleased and grateful. Well, among his invitations was one that took precedence of all the others. The King's Ball at St. James Palace. Oh, he got himself ready for that, all right. And for the sake of the convenience and comfort, he resumed his native costume, thinking no harm. 11 o'clock p.m., he appeared in that gorgeous assemblage, clad only in his awful innocence and that pathetic shoulder skin. He cleared that place of two miles long. I wish I could see that. Well, maybe not. Well, then the guards threw him out on the street, and he went back to his hotel, and they refused him. He went back to another hotel and they refused him. It looked like he was not going to find any accommodations at all till he was rescued by some compassionate friends. And the wise and the unwise began on him in the newspapers and laid him in a dance. All wasted ink, in my opinion. Whether it's right or whether it's wrong is beside the point. Customs don't concern themselves with what's right or wrong. Laws are sand. Customs are rock. They're built with brass, boiler iron, granite. Facts and reasoning and arguments, why, they have no bearing on customs any more than the idle winds have on the rock of Gibraltar. Where was I? Oh, yeah, Adam and Eve. Now, you would think the threat to punish Adam and Eve for disobeying was not carried out. They didn't create themselves or their natures or their weaknesses. They weren't subject to anybody's commands or responsible to anybody for their acts. Well, it'll surprise you to know the threat was carried out. Adam and Eve were punished. And that crime has found apologists unto this day. So the first pair left the garden under a curse, a permanent one. They lost all the pleasures they'd known before the fall, but they had one with all the others. They knew the supreme art, and they practiced it diligently. They were filled with delight. Why, even the deity ordered them to practice it. And they obeyed. But this time, just as well it wasn't forbidden, or they'd have practiced it any half 1,000 deities had forbidden it. Well, results followed by the name of Cain and Abel, and they had sisters, and they knew what to do with them, and there were more results, and so the habit pleasure of populating the world went on from age to age with prime efficiency. Well, even the gods in heaven came down and had wonderful times with those hot young blossoms. The Bible tells all about it. Well, it was a big disappointment to the deity. He was dissatisfied with his morals, which looked a whole lot like his own. And so he decided the only way to redeem the situation was to just abolish man off the face of the earth. But he took pride in man. Man was his finest invention, after the monkey. Man was his pet, after the housefly. And so he decided he would save a sample of them and drown the rest. Well, no one in his family were saved. If that could be called an advantage, I throw in the if for the simple reason there's never been a person of the age of 60 who wanted to live his life over again. Is there anybody else's? Well, no one in his family was saved, but they weren't happy. Why? Well, because they were full of microbes. I mean, full to the eyebrows. Fat with them. Distended like balloons. It was a disagreeable condition, but it couldn't be helped because enough microbes had to be saved to supply the future race of men with decimating diseases. And there was only 8 persons on board to serve as hotel for. Why, the microbes were the most important part of the ark's cargo. The part that deity was most infatuated with, most anxious about. Well, they had to have good nourishment, pleasant accommodations. It was a typhoid germ, cholera germ, hydrophobia germ, black plague germ, lockjaw germ, and the black plague germ, and the hydrophobia germ, Did I repeat myself? Oh, hundreds of other aristocrats. All precious gifts of God's love to mankind. Well, they had to be sumptuously housed, richly entertained. These were located in the choicest places the interior family could furnish. The heart, lungs, liver, blood, brain, gut. That was their favorite resort. There they gathered by the countless billions and fed and played and squirmed and danced and sang hymns of praise and thanksgiving. At night, when it was quiet, you could hear the soft murmur of it. Why, the large intestines was their heaven. They stuffed it solid, made it rigid as a coil of gas pipe. They took pride in that. Their principal hymn made gratified reference to it. Constipation, constipation, the joyful sound proclaim, till man's remotest entrails shall praise his Maker's name. It's wonderful, the thorough and comprehensive study that the deity has made to the great work of making man's life miserable. Why, he's devised a special affliction agent for every part of man's body, not overlooking a single one. And I tell the truth. But you know what he did during the time of the flood. There were multitudes and multitudes of tiny little children who done him no harm, but their relations had, and that was enough for him. And he saw the water rising up to their screaming lips. He saw the look of terror in their eyes and the agony of the appeal on the faces of their mothers, which would have touched any heart but him. Well, he was after the innocent particularly, and he drowned those poor little chaps. What the insane father requires is blood and misery. He's indifferent as to who furnishes it. And the priest has had a share in this too. Out of the history of yesterday's date, why the priest has duplicated God's work in Native American Indians in the very spirit of God. Did you know there's been more innocent blood spilt by the church since the beginning of its supremacy than all the political wars put together have spilled? Man is the only animal with a true religion. Several of them. He's the only animal that loves his neighbors himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. Why, he's made a graveyard of the globe, trying his honest best to smooth his brother's pathway to happiness in heaven. He was at it in the Crusades. He was at it in the Inquisition. He was at it in France for a couple of centuries. He was at it in England in Mary's day. He's been at it ever since he first saw the light. And he's at it today, and he'll be at it somewhere else tomorrow. You know, the higher animals don't have a religion. And we're told they're going to be left out of the hereafter. I wonder why. Seems questionable taste. All the higher animals engage in individual fights, but never in organized masses. Man is the only animal that deals in that atrocity of atrocities, war. He's the only animal that gathers his brethren about him and goes forth in calm plumps and cold blood to exterminate his own kind. The only animal that robs his helpless fellow of his country and drives him out and destroys them. He's done this in every age. There's not an acre of ground on this globe that's in the right possession of its owner that hadn't been taken from owner after owner, cycle after cycle, by force and bloodshed. Man is only patriot. Sets himself apart in his own country under his own flag and sneers at all the other nations. Keeps multitudinous uniformed assassins on hand at great expense to grab slices of other people's country and to keep them from grabbing slices of his own. And in the interval between campaigns, he washes the blood off of his hands and works for the universal brotherhood of man with his mouth. And what is a patriot? Oh, it's one that grovels to the family, shouts to the government, be they in the right, be they in the wrong, especially when they're in the wrong. That they call standing by the country. Patriotism. That sham, that perversion, that silver gilt nursery babble, wherewith this combination of land grabbers and constitution tinkers and imbeciles and hypocrites called the government beguiles those confiding children, the people. Oh, it's a sweet thing, is patriotism. It's the last refuge of a scoundrel. Man is a reasoning animal, such as a claim. Well, I think it's open to dispute. Indeed, my experiments have proven to me that he's the unreasoning animal. Why, just look at his history. There's proof right there. His history is a long record of a maniac. I consider that the greatest count against him. With that history back of him, sets himself up as a higher animal. When by his own standards he ought to be down at the bottom. In short, man is incurably foolish. Simple things that the other animals easily learn, why he's incapable of learning. Among my experiments was this. In an hour, I taught a cat and dog to be friends and I put them in a cage. Then I added a rabbit. And over the course of 2 days, I added a fox, a goose, a squirrel, some doves, and a monkey. Why, they live together in peace, even affectionately. Well, in another cage, I confined an Irish Catholic. And when he seemed tame, I added a Scotch Presbyterian. And then a Turk from Constantinople. A Greek Christian from Crete. A Methodist from the wilds of Arkansas. And finally, a Salvation Army colonel from Wappy. And I stayed away 2 whole days. Well, when I came back to check results, why, the cage of our animals was fine. But in the other, there was but a chaos of odds and ends, of turbans and fezzes and plaids and flesh and bone. There wasn't a specimen left alive. These reasoning animals had disagreed over a theological detail in taking the matter to a higher court. I consider the fault of man to be the moral sense. He's the only animal that has it. It's the secret of his degradation, the quality that allows him to do wrong. And I've been studying the traits and dispositions of the lower animals, so-called, and comparing them to the traits and dispositions of man. Well, I find the results humiliating to me. It obliges me to renounce my allegiance to the Darwinian theory of the ascent of man from the lower animals. I think that theory ought to be vacated for a new and true one. The new and true one would be the descent of man from the higher animals. We're strangely made. We think we're such wonderful creatures part of the time we think that. And in the interval, we consider with pride our mental equipment, our penetration, our power of analysis, our ability to reason out clear conclusions from confused facts and all the rest of it. And then a rational interval comes and disenchants us and lays us bare to ourselves. And we see that intellectually we really know great things. We seldom know the things we think we know. And all our best-built certainties are but sand houses subject to doubt from any wind that blows. And this is a matter for thought, a serious thought. It's full of a grim suggestion that we are not as important as we've all along thought we were. Man has only one truly effective weapon: laughter. And when it comes, all our hardness yields, all our bitterness and resentment fades away, and a sunny spirit takes their place. People are always asking me, why do you say such things? And I remind them that ours is a useful task and a worthy calling. And in spite of all its laughter and frivolity, it has one speciality, one purpose, and it is constant to it: the deriding of sham, the exposure of pretentious falsities, and the laughing of superstitions out of existence. And whosoever by instinct is engaged in this kind of warfare is the natural enemy of royalty, privileges, nobility, and all of the swindlers, and the natural friend of human rights and human liberties. Now I think I'm going to smoke this cigar. Thank you. Questions I'd like to ask Ernie Mills. What's your Mark Twain questions?
When I found out I was lucky enough to get to come see you do this with your two precious sisters, I did a little research. I've always been a fan, but mostly just quotes that I would hear here and there. But I also found that that you had a very sad childhood, like a very abusive father, and that's why, like with Huck Finn, like that dad always showed up or something. Is that true?
Yeah, there's probably some identification there with Twain, yeah, in that regard. Yeah. Not a very happy childhood. And I think Huck Finn was an alter ego for him. I think that was really him speaking out of his own childhood. But anyway, I'll memorize that. I did this skit several years ago, and I realized the first time I did it that there was not a lot of laughter. And I realized it's pretty serious stuff, and it's pretty heavy and a little bit on the irreverent side, I think. I thought, well, I wish I would have memorized something else other than that, but that was it. Well, thank y'all for coming out tonight, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we thank Christine for allowing us her space.
Yes.
I'm glad you said that. I'm going to thank Don, come up here.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Don and Derek and Becky, come up here. Come on. These folks help me. Well, Lisa and Tom, come on. Lisa and Tom. Tom, come on. Come on, boy. I want to thank these people. I'd like for you all to give them a round of applause because they helped me put all this together. set out the chairs and everything. Don Greason, Derek Harrison, Becky Cry, Alyssa Mosley, and Tom Cosmon.
Janice and Jim, too.
I'd like to thank Christine for allowing us her space. And we can see her marvelous artwork on the walls, and we certainly would encourage you to take it home.
Yes,